In this video, I'm going to try to answer the question, what is the best encoder and render settings to use for Sony Vegas? If my voice sounds a little rough, it's because I'm getting over a cold, so sorry about that. Before we get started, be sure to look down in the video description. It will list the chapters so you can skip ahead to the parts of the video that interest you. It will also have all the links to the various videos used to create this. So let's get started. Sony AVC is the first rendering option I'm going to talk about. AVC stands for Advanced Video Codec, which basically means H.264. Sony AVC is probably the simplest to use simply because it has the least amount of options, but it's not necessarily the best encoder available in Sony Vegas, but generally the results are very good when I use it. So this is a test video I created just so I could render it out 100 different times using all different encoders and see which I like the best. So if you had your finished video and you were going to render it out because you wanted to upload it to YouTube, we'll go render as, and we're going to do Sony AVC. We're going to go through the options. So we're going to click on custom, and it's going to bring up this box, and we'll go through these in pretty good detail, give you my reasoning behind why I picked these settings. Okay, video format, we're going to be AVC, obviously, not memory stick. Now, your frame size, typically you want to match your camera. If your camera is shooting in 1920 by 1080, then you're going to probably want to pick that. If you have a camera and you shot most of your footage in 1280 by 720, then that's maybe the choice you want to pick. Because, you know, up-resing to a 1920 by 1080, typically it won't look bad if your camera is at 720, but it's not going to, you know, magically make your video look that much better. If you have a lower resolution camera like a 640 by 480, you're going to want to pick that. If you up-res that to 1920 by 1080, it's not going to look good. Also, if you want that 1080 on your YouTube video, that option for 1080, you're going to have to render to this setting right here, just so you know. So we got our frame size. You're going to want this to be unchecked to adjust frame size. Okay, the profile high. Now you got three options here. You got baseline, main, and high, and you're going to want to pick high. And the reason you're going to want to pick high is because if we go to Wikipedia here, we take a look, this is high profile, this is main, and this is baseline, and you can see a high profile uses these more advanced encoding techniques, and what that should translate to is a better looking video at a lower size, a lower bit rate. It's the same reasoning for the entropy encoding. You have two options here, CAVLC and CABAC. I recommend BAC because, again, if you go here, basically it's more complicated, but it gives better compression. So I definitely recommend that. Okay, now frame rate. Typically you're going to want to match your camera. Most cameras shoot at 29.97, the vast majority. Some people do use the 23.976, and in that case you'll want to do that. YouTube will preserve that frame rate, but all my stuff was shot in 29.97. I do have some 60 frames per second, and the only exception is if you do, like GoPros will shoot in 60 frames per second. You don't want to set this to 60. In fact, it's not even an option with Sony Vegas. I mean, not Sony Vegas, but with the Sony AVC. But if you do render a video out to 60 frames per second, once you upload it to YouTube, YouTube will chop it back down to 30. So there's, just go with the 29.97. Don't send YouTube a 60 frame per second video. It's not going to do you anything. Okay, keep this unchecked. Allow source to adjust frame size. Field order progressive. You want progressive. Pixel aspect ratio is going to be 1. You would only change that if you were shooting something in anamorphic. Okay, bit rate. This I'm going to go into a greater detail, and the highest you can put in here is 20 million under the Sony AVC. There's some other encoders you can go even higher, but 20 million is more than enough for almost everything you got out there. Typically 10 million is probably a good starting point because you have to look really hard to see a difference from 10 million. Depending on the complexity of your video, 10 million is usually more than enough. And once I go through these options, I'm going to have 7 videos laid out, and they're all encoded at different bit rates, and you'll be able to click on them and see the difference in the bit rate. So start at 10 million, 15 million, and you can put in whatever you want too. You don't have to. You can put in 8 million or whatever. So if size is an issue, you can keep lowering your bit rate until you get your movie rendered out at an acceptable size. You know, if you have something that's very long, you may have to keep lowering the bit rate to get it to meet the maximum size requirement for uploading to YouTube. So let's go on to audio. Okay, AAC stands for Advanced Audio Codec. The sample rate I recommend is 48, and that's because most video cameras record audio at 48. It has to do with syncing the audio and the video I was reading. I rendered videos out to 44, and that's fine too, but I recommend 48. Honestly, you're not going to be able to tell the difference, but just put 48 if you don't know. Okay, bit rate 128. Now I have seen people recommend 160 and 192. AAC is a very efficient codec, and you will not be able to tell the difference between 128, 192, 160, and anything higher than that is just ridiculously overkill. And secondly, most of my video cameras I have record at 128, so going higher than that is not going to get you anything. It's just a pointless, you're just pointlessly increasing the bit rate and you're not getting any more quality. So that's why I recommend 128. Stereo, obviously. System, we're going to want to use the MP4 wrapper, the MP4 container. And then project, you're going to want that to be best. I don't even know why you would use these other settings, but they're there. And then that's it. Put in your file name, hit save, and you're ready to render out your video. What you see here is the same video rendered 7 times using the settings I just talked about, using the Sony AVC. The only difference between the videos is the bit rate, so you can compare the difference. Note, you can click on any of the videos and watch it in full screen in 1080, and in the description of each video will be all the info in the file you could possibly want, like file size, actual bit rate, etc. Alright, so what do we learn from these tests? Well, I'll just go down the bit rates and kind of give you my observations. At 1 million, the video obviously looked horrible, as expected. At 3 million bits per second, the water still looks really bad. The night sky looked very blocky, very bad, stuttering on a mushroom, pretty much terrible. At 5 million, it starts to look almost acceptable. There's still some issues, like on the water, you'll see some blocks. There's some pulsing on the image. At 7 million, it's finally looking pretty acceptable, where you have to look pretty close. But if you pause it and look and compare it to the say the 20 million one, you can see that there's some slight blocking on the water around the 59-second mark. And at the end of the video, Sony AVC doesn't seem to like to encode screenshot text. Like, that seems to be a really hard thing for Sony AVC to handle. As you'll see later on, the main concept seemed to handle it a lot better, and so did some of the other codecs. But overall, the 7 million looks pretty good. Just go to the 1 minute 30 and you'll see the text is not nearly as sharp as at 20 million. 10 million is very acceptable, but again, the text, you'll see some artifacts around the text at around the 1 minute 30 mark again. 15 million, same thing. It's looking better at the 1 minute 30. I mean, everything else looks perfect. You have to go to the very end of the video at around 130, 132, and if you pause it, you'll see that there's some minor artifacts around the text. But again, 99% of the people would never notice it. And at 20 million, it looks the best, which is kind of to be expected. But then again, I kind of was told that if you send a video to YouTube that has too high of a bit rate, YouTube won't know what to do with all these extra bits, and it'll actually make your video look worse. And that definitely turned out not to be true in this situation. The 20 million bitrate video looks the best, and if you pause it frame by frame and go through it, it's definitely the best looking video out of the bunch. So if space is not an issue, 20 million seems to be the ticket, at least with Sony AVC. But anyways, I'm going to show you next about main concept and how I was able to get a video that looked just as good as the 20 million bit rate in Sony AVC using the main concept with a much lower bit rate, somewhere around 10 million. So let's go on to that next. Now I'm going to talk about using the main concept encoder. I think it's a little better than the Sony AVC because it supports variable bitrate and it supports 2-pass, which is always better than a single pass if you have the time. So let's go through the options. We're going to pick main concept, AVC, advanced video codec. Click on the custom, and here's the window. Let me pull up my template. Okay. Now you have to select custom frame size because there is no drop down for 1920 by 1080. Just pop in whatever resolution you want to render your video out to. Always leave these unchecked, adjust frame size and adjust frame rate. That's pretty much true for every encoder. Profile main and baseline are your only two options. Interestingly, this does not support the high profile. Frame rate, you're going to want to pick 29.97 because that's the vast majority of what cameras shoot in, although some people may be working with a 23.97. Field order progressive, pixel aspect ratio 1 because you're not shooting anamorphic, and if you are, then you'll know what to put there. Number of reference frames, now this one's a little bit of an unknown right here. I played around with it a little bit and I didn't really notice any differences, or I didn't at all, and so I really don't know. I just left it at the default of 2, and I got fantastic results with this encoder. So unless you know exactly what this does, leave it at 2. Use deblocking filter. I tried it with and without, and I couldn't tell a difference, but maybe my bit rate was high enough it didn't matter. What I would do is I would render out the video. I would leave it off, render out the video. If you notice blocks, typically you'll notice blocking in the sky or maybe dark areas of the video. If you see some blocking, you can turn it on, render it out again. That's probably the best way to use it. You don't want to have a bunch of filters if you don't need them. Okay, now this is what makes main concept better than the Sony AVC in my opinion. It supports variable bitrate and it supports 2-pass encoding. A variable bitrate's nice. It can make a video smaller without losing any quality. So that's nice because you may have a dark title screen and that doesn't require 10 million bits per second, and it'll lower the bit rate for that scene. The 2-pass is fantastic because what it does is typically an encoder goes into a video blind and it doesn't know if a scene may start out simple but then suddenly turn super complicated, and it may not be able to keep up with the bit rate and it'll turn into a blocky mess. And what the 2-pass does is it gives it a heads up on which parts of the video require more bits and which parts you can get away with. And it's just, if you have the time, definitely 2-pass is the way to go. Alright, so these are the settings I settled on, and for this particular video, these settings yielded awesome results. So I would start with these and then adjust accordingly depending on what you see. Maximum bit rate of 10 million. The average bit rate is 7 million. As we saw, we had those 7 Sony AVC videos rendered out, and the highest one I rendered out was at 20 million bits per second. This video looks even better, just as good or even better, and it's at less than half the bit rate. So that says a lot for the main concept codec. And it's still H.264, it's just the encoders gives you different options. So even though you're rendering them out to the same codec, the encoders make a big difference. Let's go to the audio. 48, 128 is what I recommend, and then best for the quality always. And that is the main concept encoder. I definitely recommend that you give this one a try. I think it's probably one of the best options, if not the best option to use if you're using Sony Vegas. Alright, I'm briefly going to go over the Windows Media Video Codec here. Render as Windows Media Video 11 Custom. I've had okay results with this. There was one section of the video that it wouldn't render out correctly, which is at the beginning where it zooms up. Here, let me show you that real quick. This section right here, as you can see when you click it on when you watch it on the YouTube channel page, I could not get Windows Media Video to play this section smoothly. You'll see that there's some stuttering when whereas I was able to get it to work with the Sony AVC and the main concept. But the rest of the video looked perfectly fine. So I'll just go through the settings that I found that worked pretty well. For audio, constant bitrate is fine because audio doesn't take up a lot of space. You could do VBR too. But if you do VBR, see you only got quality 98. What does that even mean? I don't know. If you do CBR, you can specify the 128/48. So that's why I picked CBR. Also, I picked 9.2. I think I had some crashing problems when I picked Audio 10 Professional, but you can give it a try. I doubt you'll be able to hear a difference. Okay, now for the video, we got a couple of different options here. 2-pass is what I settled on. 2-pass is almost always superior to single pass. I picked the Video 9 Advanced Profile. You have to pick custom here because there is no drop down for 1920 by 1080. That's going to be 1. Frame rates 29.97. Interestingly, there's a drop down for 59.95 or 94, but again, YouTube will chop it down to 29.97, so don't bother. Even if your stuff's shot at 60 frames per second. Okay, now the video smoothness. I've tried both ends of the spectrum, and I can't tell any difference. In fact, I have a screenshot. One is video smoothness at 100, and one is video smoothness at 0. Can you tell a difference? I can't. And if we go over here to the sky, maybe the sky, we can tell a difference. Nope, can't tell a difference. So as far as I can tell, this does nothing. Okay, bitrate. You can put in whatever you want. 10, as we've seen, is 7 to 10 is a good bitrate. What I uploaded on YouTube was at 10 million. So you can take a look what 10 million looks like. It looks perfectly fine. This is nothing. Don't worry about that. And then best, as always. And that's Windows Media. Let's take a look at the video on YouTube briefly. We can look down here and we can look at bitrate 10 million. A little high, 10.4, so it bumped it up just a smidgen. And as you can see, it looks perfectly fine on YouTube. So it's a viable codec, I would say. I don't know that it's any better than main concept or anything like that. This scene, though, is the only negative I can really find with it. It's very jerky. Now there's going to be some additional jerkiness because I'm screen recording, but when you play it on YouTube, you'll see that scene didn't render out correctly for some reason. But that's the Windows Media Video Codec in a nutshell. So if you don't like the first 3 rendering options I gave you, I found the 4th one, and there will be one more after this, a VP8 tutorial. And what I found was this video right here, and basically what this guy does is he renders it out to an Avid DNxHD video, or DNxHD intermediate codec, and then he runs it through Handbrake. And this is Handbrake right here. This is a program that is good for converting videos, especially if you want to play them on your iPhone. It has a lot of settings here. See all these advanced settings, so you can really tailor it. I don't know what most of these do, so I just leave it normally on normal when I'm converting stuff over. I have a couple other settings here, but so if you watch this tutorial, it's pretty good. He also talks about some color space issues. Let's see if I can find it here. Right here where you can apply some filters here if your videos are getting too dark and the grays are turning into blacks. So it's a good video. I'll put a link somewhere on the page. It's a little more complicated. I tried it, but unfortunately I ran into a problem with the Avid codec. I installed it fine, but then when I would render out my video to the intermediate codec, when I would get to this scene, let me full screen it. Notice how the text turns different colors here? I tried every way under the sun, rendered this thing out numerous times, just this particular scene, and I could not get this Avid DNxHD codec to not turn the text different colors. It was the weirdest thing. I even went so far as I changed this to a grayscale, so it was just gray with black text, and rendered it, and then, yes, then the text stayed black like it was supposed to, but if it was in color, I got these weird different colors in the text. The rest of the video looks perfectly fine. There's no issue with anything else in the video. It's just at the very end right here. And this scene caused a lot of problems for a lot of the different codecs. So that's why I'm not going to use this method, just because it's more time consuming. It's an extra step, and but it's available, and you know, you have to judge for yourself whether you think the results, whether it's worth the extra effort. So you say you want to stop using the patented encumbered H.264 codec. You want to stick it to the man, specifically the MPEG LA group. Well, I got the solution for you, and it is called VP8. What is VP8? VP8 is an open video compression format released by Google. This is their website. You can check them out here, and you can render videos straight from Vegas into the VP8 format. I found out. All you have to do is you have to download the video codec from this site. It says here it does not work on Vista 64 or Win 64, but I have Vista 64 and it worked on my computer, so give it a try. And then this is the video that I rendered out using the VP8 codec. I'll have a link on here, and you can see it plays fine. Looks good. And even at the very end of the video, it looks good. So no problem quality wise. And I'll show you how to do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to just render out a little sliver of the video. Render as, and now what you're going to pick is you're going to pick Windows AVI. And the AVI is cool because you can install different codecs in there, and they'll work in the AVI container. And so you'll know you have you'll know that it's installed correctly because the Google VP8 video codec will appear in a drop-down. Here's another one I installed, the Lagrowth lossless codec. This is a good intermediate codec. Very large file sizes, but good quality. So we'll go back to the Google one. Go to configure. Okay, so these are some of the options. This is going to want to be unrestricted. And then you have 4 different types of encoding. I recommend, if you have the time, to do the 2-pass. And the way it works, it's a little different than the main concept 2-pass. This is a 2-step process, whereas main concept automated the process for you. So what you want to do is select pass 1, and you'll see how it grays it out, and you hit OK. And then these 1920 by 1080, 29.97, same as we've been doing all video. You don't want to interleave. You don't need to create that. Now the audio, not to get too sidetracked, but in order for the MPEG 3 option to appear, normally what you'll see is this, no supported formats, in which case you're going to have to use PCM uncompressed audio, which isn't the end of the world, but it will add some size to your files. So if you go to get this to work, you have to download the Fraunhofer MP3 codec, and it'll work with Sony Vegas. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the lame MP3 codec, which is open source and free. I could not get that to work with Sony Vegas. Probably in the future it will work, but right now I couldn't get it to work. But the Fraunhofer is not that hard to find. I found it in less than a minute googling it. So download that, install it on your computer, make sure it's not a virus, and then you'll be able to use the VP8 with MP3. So once we have this set up, we're going to hit OK. Let me double check that it was on one pass. Pass 1. Okay. And then this is going to be my test video. I'm just going to render a little slice of it so it doesn't take so long. Save. Yes, we're going to override it. So there it is. It's done. Close it. And now we're ready for the second pass. So we're going to go render as, custom, configure. We're going to go pass 2. Now you can go all the way up to 50 million, which is crazy. The max for a Sony AVC was 20 million, but we're going to go with 10 million. You could just type in 10 million. Actually, it's in Kbps, so 10,000. But 10,228, that's close enough. Hit OK. Again, adjust your bitrate as needed. Your file sizes are too big, adjust it down. You start seeing quality issues, adjust it up. It's pretty simple. And then we're good to go. Hit OK. Now you have to make sure that you type in the file name exactly as your first pass. Or you can just click on it. It'll put it right in there. Hit save. Yes. And now it's actually rendering the video. So that's how you use VP8 WebM with Sony Vegas. I'm going to start using this as much as possible. Alright, miscellaneous info about YouTube that I learned during this process. The first thing is, as you may have may not caught, if you upload a video to YouTube at 60 frames per second, which this one is, this video right here was uploaded at 60 frames per second. And I'll show you the video that I uploaded. Let me find it here. Here it is, a 60 frame per second test. And if we look to media info on it, we will see it really is 60 frames per second. There it is, 59.94 frames per second. And then what I did is I downloaded it from YouTube after YouTube did its thing to it. And let me find it here. Here it is. We'll open it back up. And we can see that this is what YouTube did to it. It chopped it down to 30 frames per second. And YouTube uses variable frame rate, just so you know, because they're using all the tricks to get the videos as efficient as possible, because they have to pay for the bandwidth. So that was the first interesting thing. Another thing is, if you upload a video at 24 frames per second, will YouTube preserve that frame rate? This is a video uploaded. This was a video I got off the internet that was shot by a red test camera, test video, and I downloaded it. Now let me show you the original file if I can find it here. Well, actually I don't have it in that folder. I don't want to feel like searching for it, but if we look right here, this is all the information on it. And right here, frame rate 23.976 is the frame rate I uploaded to YouTube. So if we find it that I downloaded from YouTube, which is it right here, and we'll look at the frame rate. YouTube does preserve the frame rate, although it does turn it to a variable, but it didn't vary it by very much. So that was interesting. There was one other thing I noticed that was interesting about YouTube. Oh yeah. Okay, this video right here, which is the Sony AVC rendered at 20 million bits per second, which was, overkill. I wanted to know, what did YouTube's encoder do to this video? So I downloaded it, and this is it right here, and we'll go media info, and we'll be able to compare the two. This is the one I uploaded. Let me get the one I uploaded, which is right here. Nope, that's not it. This is it right here. Media info. Okay. So we'll fire up these two media infos. Come down here. Okay, so the bit rate maximum bit rate was 22 million, average was about 18 million, and what YouTube did is YouTube chopped it all the way down to the average bit rate was only around 6 million. It did peak at 29 though, at one spot though. And if we want to see where it peaked at, I have like a million windows open right now. Come on, there it is. Okay. And so what we'll do is we'll just drag the one I downloaded from YouTube in there. Actually, we'll open up two of them. So we have two of them right here. And this is the original file. And then the one from YouTube, which was, where was it at? Download from YouTube, this one right here. And you can see what YouTube did. It chopped down a lot of it, but this particular scene, the scene where it zooms, that is like a codec killer. Look at what it shot up to, almost 30 million bits per second. That's kind of high. So YouTube encoders definitely did a lot, but amazingly enough, the video looks really good. So it goes to show that most of those bit rates were not needed. Let me go right here. Still plays perfectly fine. So, and this is just as sharp as on the one I uploaded. So YouTube has some pretty good encoders. So generally YouTube doesn't take too much quality off your video. And that was it. I thought that was interesting. So what kind of conclusions can we draw from all this? The first thing I learned was doing one of these tests takes 100 times longer than you think it will. Now, which one of these do I think is the best? Probably straight out of the box, I would recommend the main concept. It's easy to use, it supports variable bitrate, 2-pass, and the results were very good. Sony AVC is also a solid choice. It definitely yields good results. What bitrate would I use? Generally, I think I'm going to recommend starting out at 10 and adjusting yourself from there. If you see something that doesn't look perfect, then I would adjust the bitrate higher. 10 million typically seems to render everything out pretty much perfect, although with the Sony AVC at the end of the video, you did notice that the 10 million, if you screenshot it and zoom up, you will see that the text is a little bit, has just a tiny bit more artifacts than the main concept at a lower bitrate. Let's talk about this scene right here, the codec killer scene. Where is it at? Where is it? Right here. See, what it is a grid pattern. It's highly complex and it zooms up really fast. In fact, here it is. It zooms up right here. That scene caused all kinds of problems for all these codecs, really. Except the Sony AVC. It didn't really have a problem with it. The main concept would stutter depending on the settings. The VP8 would stutter depending on the settings, and the Windows Media Player also stuttered. I highly doubt anyone's going to have a scene like this that just causes the codec to go through the roof. Variable bitrate seemed to have more problems with it because it was trying to allocate a ton of bits to it. In fact, if I tried to play this scene with a Windows Media Player on a couple of the files I rendered out, it actually crashed Windows Media Player. It was kind of funny, but Windows Media Player is a piece. VLC plays these videos better 99% of the time. Main concept, I would recommend if space is not an issue, you can go with a single pass and crank up the bit rate. If you have a long video and you need to make it under the maximum file size so you can upload it to YouTube, then definitely want to use the 2-pass variable bitrate and then adjust your bitrate till you get the quality, with the size requirements. I'm going to use VP8 because I want to get away from the H.264, and if I can get good results with VP8 and it's an open source codec, that's what I'm going to do. And so far I'm pretty happy with it. Last thing I'm going to talk about is a difference in these codecs I've noticed. If we go to this scene right here, which is a very dark scene, you will notice that the blacks are actually, go back a little more, 3901. What else is interesting is YouTube, the keyframes are all exactly the same. Even though it was rendered out to a different codec, look at the keyframes. They're all at 39.01. Oh, that's 39.02. So one frame further. You'll notice this is darker. These two, the AVC, the H.264, is a little darker than the VP8 and the Windows Media, and I believe it has to do with the color space issues. If you go back and look at that video that I linked in the middle of this using the Avid DNxHD intermediate codec, they talk about color space and the way certain encoders will basically adjust at the very end of the spectrum of the color, or maybe it's not spectrum, not the right word, but the illegal grays and illegal whites, it'll shift them, and that's easy to fix with a filter. They talk about doing that, but that's just something that I noticed that was interesting. So that's basically it. Hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them, and I'll talk to you later.